I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
I couldn't sing that way. So I started to kind of fade in who I was and pull back.
Yeah.
Because I kept thinking, oh, so I must be irrelevant now. Like I had to wrestle and wrestle and wrestle that through until I came to the other side where I thought, oh, wait, people say the same words to me over and over when I sing. And I've been pushing those to the side thinking that isn't enough.
You're listening to the Ferment podcast, conversations about worship and transformation. Today's guest is Cindy Rethmeier. Cindy is a veteran worship leader and songwriter, author of Exalt the Lord, I Bow Down, and most recently Kyrie Eléison, co-written with Ted Kim. This episode is brought to you by Monk Drums. Monk Drums is a creative desert venture that strives to combine beauty and business as one heartbeat. Monk Drums' main focus is handcrafted wooden drums that allow us to love, assist, and serve all who accompany us on this path. Use the coupon code FERMENTPOD to get 5% off your Monk Drums order. Find them on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Monk Drums, and every Monday look for hashtag Monk Drum Monday. Speaking from personal experience, monk drums are wonderfully crafted and they sound amazing. They blend the best traits of both the djembe and the cajon, and I found them to be incredibly versatile in both the live and studio environment. Check them out at monkdrums.com. This episode is brought to you by our friends at worshipteam.com. Worship Team comes preloaded with over 12,000 songs, with new songs being added all the time. Hillsong, Bethel, Vineyard, Jesus Culture, Passion, just to name a few. Service building with Worship Team is a snap, and all the songs are completely legal and licensed. Visit them at worshipteam.com today for a free trial. You can also find them on social media: Facebook at worshipteam.com, Twitter at worshipteam, Instagram at worshipteam_WT. Complete worship planning with thousands of songs, easy interface, mobile apps, and legal rights for your church. All you need in one place: worshipteam.com.
Hey everybody, this is Darren Verrier, Director of Publishing for Vineyard Worship. Our latest single, You're Carrying Me, written by my good friends Casey Coram and Chris McQueen, is the second of our monthly singles, available on the first Friday of every month.
I'm waiting, you're running, and I'm leaning into you. You're carrying me, you're carrying me. Carrying me, and I choose to trust you, Lord. You're carrying me, you're carrying me, you're carrying me, and I choose to trust you, Lord. I trust you, I trust you, I trust you.
Check it out wherever you listen to music.
Hey everyone, this is Casey. Just a quick producer's note. In this conversation, Adam and Cindy refer to Carl and to John. They're referring to Carl Tuttle, a pastor and one of the early songwriters and worship leaders in the Vineyard, and John Wimber, the founder of the Vineyard movement.
All right, everybody. Hey, my name is Adam Russell. You're listening to the Ferment podcast, and I am in cloudy Southern California.
Cloudy. What's up with this?
I have no idea.
And it's been so beautiful lately. It's sad that well, it's going to rain.
That's right. And everyone's freaking out.
We're really excited.
That's right.
Yeah.
But I'm here in cloudy Southern California today.
Yep.
And that voice you heard is my good friend, Cindy Rethmeier. Cindy, say hello.
Hey.
That's right. Hey, the reason I'm excited to be here, well, just a lot of reasons. One, you've just been like this really amazing gift of encouragement in my life for like the last 3 years.
Good.
You know?
That's a good thing to hear.
It is. Like at really strategic moments, you have emailed me these amazing things. So that's one thing. So just to be in your world is always good. But I'm excited today because we get to have a conversation that I think is going to be illuminating for some people. If you don't know, Cindy is, to use this phrase, within the Vineyard mythology. Within Vineyard mythology, Cindy is like first female worship leader.
Makes me sound really old.
You know what's really funny? I had a similar conversation with Carl Tuttle yesterday.
Yeah.
This was his exact reaction.
Well, it does. It makes us sound old. Mythology. That's an old word.
Oh, I love it, though. Love it. I just want to start there. How did you come to the Vineyard, and how did you start leading worship? Like, what happened?
So it was 1978, and there was this friend of mine named Steve who became my husband, and he said that he would take me with him to Calvary Chapel, Yorba Linda. So back then it was one of the high schools, El Dorado High School in Placentia. So he came, picked me up. We weren't dating. He came, picked me up, and brought me to this funny room. Had a stage. I guess it was their theater arts complex, kind of. It was really old. And we walked in the door, and they were singing. And as we walked in the door, I thought, oh my gosh, I'm home. Hmm. That was such an interesting thing, too, because...
Do you remember what they were singing?
No.
Yeah.
That was a long time ago.
Yeah.
It was probably some chorus where there was an echo part from the girls. It was that kind of a,
yeah, of course,
of a thing. And what was interesting about that phrase in my head is that I had never even thought about that before. Like that was new language for me.
Were you a church person?
Yeah, grew up Southern Baptist and EV Free in Fullerton, and loved God, loved the church, loved to sing, loved all of that. But when I walked in that room, I knew I was home.
And why do you think home was the word that came up?
I don't know. It was as if that place had always been resident in me. That whatever I walked into, it was familiar enough to feel like home. Mm. So interesting, even now thinking about it. That was such an interesting thing. So shortly after that, we started dating, and I went to, this will make Carl laugh. We were by that time, we were only there at El Dorado when I was apart just for a few months, I think. So then the next school was Esperanza in Anaheim, but kind of close to Yorba Linda. So we went to that building, and we were worshiping once, and Carl did some song that had a girl's part to it. And I just walked up to him afterwards, and I said, "Did you know that has an echo?" And he said, "Yeah, do you know it?" And I said, "Well, yeah." And he goes, "Okay, sing it next week." And just recently, I went up to him and I said, "What would you have done if I was like terrible? What if I couldn't sing?" And he goes, "Well, I guess I would have dealt with that when it came up."
That's amazing.
And so we sang together ever since.
That's amazing.
So that was it. It was just as far as connecting me and Carl.
Yeah.
But then it went into, and this has become the big joke between us. I think he even put this in his book because he lies about it and says it didn't happen.
Yeah.
But then we were at another high school, and the stage was kind of small. It was only about 5 inches off the ground, right? It was just big enough to put all of the wires underneath it. And so he would, when the girls' part came up, he would look over at me and kind of nod his head back, and say, that was my cue to come forward.
Yeah.
So then I'd come down, and he'd end that song, and then I'd pick up a microphone off the stage, stay off of the stage, sing the part, and then go back to my seat.
You'd stay off the stage because it's so small?
Yeah, and I think there were other issues too at the time. They were trying to not make it be an open thing because it was so new and there were so many people coming.
Yeah.
I mean, that was back when people were getting out of their cars on Sunday night and running to get their seats. So it it was just a different day.
Yeah, it was.
So so I became the voice that people didn't know that there was a face to the voice. It was pretty funny and great. I mean, those were really sweet times and connected all of us to this day.
Isn't that amazing? Like
yeah.
something happened in 1978, 79, 80, 82.
Mm-hmm.
A group of people form.
Yeah.
And then 40 years later, you continue to share a story.
Oh, yeah. And we're still in relationship. So when we see each other, there's still that bond of something that happened between us that has stayed warm. And, we walked through something that changed the face of the church.
It absolutely did.
Changed the face of worship.
Yeah, that's not hyperbole.
No, it really did. And of course, we didn't know it was doing that. It's not like we were thinking, oh, we're changing the world. We were just a part of something that was alive and helpful and meaningful. And there were connections with God and connections with each other. There was just this swirl of beautiful things happening. And so we just jumped all in.
Amazing. When did you start like leading worship on your own? Not so much being invited up by Carl to sing an echo, but like kind of taking that space.
I did worship for home group from that point on.
Yeah.
I mean, I was always doing worship in a home group. And then Bob and Penny Fulton started a church plant. So by this time it's 84. And well, I should go back. John, there were a couple of trips that we took to England, the first few trips, and I led worship there some. John would have me do worship there. And then any women's groups or home groups. And some of our home groups were the size of churches.
Yeah.
Back then we would have 75 to 100 people in a house,
Amazing.
So it just depended on which group it was and where it was. So did that until 84. And then I was the worship pastor for Bob and Penny. And that was until 89. And then, we've in 93 or so, 94, Chris Wimber asked me to start traveling with Vineyard Music. There were a lot of conferences and things happening,
Yeah.
So I told him I'd go if I could bring my kids, if he would pay for my kids to come instead of paying me, for my time.
Yeah.
And he agreed to that. And so we started a thing where my kids went with me everywhere. And that was really special because I homeschooled them so we could do it by whichever area of the United States we were in. We kind of studied around whatever we were doing that year. That was fun. But the other thing that was fun was that they still now know some of those people and are still connected to them. And again, those relationships they just mean so much to me.
Yeah, and what a gift to be able to not just travel with your kids, but to expose them to the work of God.
Yep.
It
was pretty great.
Yeah.
Yeah. So from then on, I led in various settings. There were conferences of a few thousand, or a church of 300, or, traveling, or a home group that had 20.
Yeah, exactly.
You just do it wherever it's happening.
That's right. Now, I know you're a worship leader, but you're not just a worship leader. You've also written a lot of great songs. How did that happen? Were you always a songwriter, or was it like that there was something kind of happening in the Vineyard during those days and you kind of got caught up into that swirl?
So the Jesus People movement, I lived in Hawaii when I was a kid for 3 years. And that's where when that started happening. And it started with singing scripture, right? So, how is it then, brethren, when we come together? Those types of songs. And so it became something in me that I just thought that's what you do. You sing scripture. So then fast forward to now we're in Vineyard days, and Well, I think still to this day, there are times when I either read a verse or a phrase or a prayer, from a prayer book or something like that, and the words sing. And so I think that listening for that song, that probably started in the 70s.
Yeah.
And then just continued from there. So
how old were you when, like, in the 70s during the Jesus people
that
thing?
would have been...
Like, were you a teenager then?
No.
Yeah.
During that part, I was 4th, 5th, and 6th grade.
Okay. Yeah.
It really impacted me, though.
Were your parents experiencing this kind of thing as well?
Yeah, we were in a Baptist church.
Yeah.
But the Jesus People movement was hitting everyone. I mean, it was a crazy time.
Yeah.
It was probably the beginning of what we then saw with the Vineyard.
Yeah, I think it is.
I mean, I think that's where it kind of started, that there was momentum happening with that. But people were always coming to any kind of concert or any of that, and that would have been our first experience with music moving us the way that it did. Yeah. But you know what? Music moved us in the 70s anyways. Yeah. So it was a season of music. There was something really special about that era.
Yeah, it was something wider in the culture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
you've just always kind of been a singer.
Yes.
Yeah.
If I were to think back to the gift of every time I talk to you, I end up crying.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
I think the gift of John for me was helping me to be attentive. And you could point to things like word of knowledge if you want, but I actually think it's much broader than that. And being aware and attentive of the things that are happening around me, listening for sometimes a still small voice, but just listening to what's going on around me, what's in the air, kind of. I don't know how else to describe that, but
so it's interesting to me that we're talking about songwriting here, and this is bringing up some other stuff for you as well.
Oh, yeah.
So there's this spontaneity that is sort of like I'm responding maybe to a scripture, you know, with a song, but it's bigger than that, right? Because John was making a bigger space, and it's about listening or being aware of the Holy Spirit.
Yes.
Or that there is a Holy Spirit, and then he is here and he's active and he's doing something.
Right.
And it touched all kinds of things.
All kinds of things. It touched every part of our lives. But I have to say, I'm realizing it more now. I think that it's just continued to grow, even in dormant, ordinary life.
Yes.
It's continued to grow and shift and develop, I guess is even another word to use for that, so that I'm realizing it's what he was talking about was for the whole of life.
Yeah.
It wasn't just for a service.
Yeah, not just to make a better meeting.
No, it was about the whole of life. So the connecting moments between people, and I did learn from John to ask, what are you saying? So that became part of the way that I would lead worship, is what do you have for us, and what are you longing to hear from us?
Oh, what a great question.
So those two questions also...
Did John say that, or was there just something about his leadership that sort of brought that to the forefront for you?
I would say it was his leadership, but maybe he did say something and I'm not remembering it.
Yeah, of course.
But asking, what are you saying? That just was part of the way that we lived, because it was do what the Father's doing, you know, that kind of language. So I guess we always kind of talked like that with John. But it did become a question for me in worship, especially if I was leading. And then, and that's the way that I would form my sets.
Yeah.
So, what are you saying?
Yeah.
And what are you longing to hear from us?
I love both questions, but I really love the second question. It's so intuitive, but we don't often go there, right?
No.
Yeah.
And I think it changes what you sing, because suddenly it's not about the song of the moment, which in our culture now, there's millions of songs. There's just so many songs.
Well, and that moment for a song gets shorter and shorter too.
Yes, it does.
Songs come up and then they're gone in 3 months or 4 months sometimes. Yep. Yeah.
And so it changed something too for a song for a certain gathered people.
Yeah.
So it might not be a song that the nations are going to sing, but what is the song that is for this gathered people in this setting, in this environment, in this church, in this house, so it changes the way that you think about songs.
Yeah. What I'm hearing and what you're saying right now, it's the difference just between being a song leader and a pastor, or a priest, if we can use some really Old Testament language, that idea of representing God to people and the people back to God. Like even then in that question, what you just said a moment ago, God, what are you longing to hear from us? That is such a priestly question.
I hadn't thought about that. I guess too, I loved when you and Hannah were talking about the people around her singing the words for her.
Oh yeah. For those of you who don't know, I had a podcast a few weeks ago, and Hannah, one of my very good friends, experienced a great deal of tragedy. But in the middle of her extreme brokenness and tragedy, she would come to church and find herself that she couldn't sing. But being there was some comfort in letting the body sing for her.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So if we were to think about that from that question that I just asked, what do you want to hear from us and what do you have to say? That shifts it. If Hannah's in my church.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and here's the thing. There is certainly a Hannah in our church every Sunday morning, right?
Right.
Of course.
And so knowing which songs, just hearing that. So, I start planning and my set is constantly shifting because I'm hearing more things. And then by the end of it, I see a thread. And John did talk to us about this. The thread that's going through each song and weaving them together to that final set of songs that say that thing that I'm hearing all week long.
Yeah.
Right. So that just became part of not only the leading, but also the writing. So then it was, what's the thing that would be meaningful for us to sing to you? What is it that would stir those things up inside of us for you?
Yes.
Do you know?
No, of course.
So I think that then shifted how I thought of songwriting. But sometimes you think that if you think that way too much, then you step outside of who you are to write for something. And so there's a fine balance, right? There's a fine line with that.
I love that approach to songwriting. I mean, I think there's this sense in songwriting. Sometimes you just sit down, you pick up an instrument, and something kind of begins to stir a bubble, and you chase that muse until it's something. And it's kind of, maybe on the front end feels spontaneous to us, when in the end it's still some other bigger story that we didn't know we were living into. But I also like what you just said. I like the idea of occasionally saying, what does my church need to sing? What would stir our hearts towards God? We've been singing these 30 songs for the last 6 months. What is the thing that's missing? Or what is it that God is saying or doing in our church right now? And maybe we need to craft a melody for that.
Yeah.
I think both are legal.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's essential.
I just think you have to be careful with it, that it doesn't become where you're writing for something way outside of yourself. So there would be the definite, making sure you're coming back to center again. And sometimes I think I would write songs like I Bow Down, which I wrote in the early 90s, I think. That song was personal in the beginning, but then it's weird how then there was a moment that I sang that song that I thought, oh, shoot, I'm not going to be able to sing this, because it hit something in me that it just hadn't occurred to me until I was singing it one day at church. And so that is really sweet when it's your own song and all of a sudden the words come alive.
Mm-hmm.
Such a gift.
When something really personal becomes
Yes.
corporate.
Oh,
Yeah.
just means so much.
Yeah.
So there were all those moments of in-between parts. In the middle of that early 90s, I wrote some kids songs, and that was a really, really precious time for me. That was probably one of the most meaningful times because it is so at the core of who I am, those kids' songs. I love that. So I kind of felt like I got to say all the stuff that I wish I had been able to sing as a kid.
Oh, got it. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So to have that language in that. So I did that for a few years, and that was a sweet season of songwriting. I sat down with John Wimber once, right after that kids record had come out. And I said, is there anything that you want to say to me about the kids songs? Like, is there anything that I'm missing or that you think that I need to know? And he looked off in the distance, as he often did. And then he said, no, just don't get dumb. Don't ever go where it's silly. You just don't need to do that. And he said, you haven't, just don't do that.
Yeah. So he was intuiting that even things like kids songs, there's a place for it. It's needed. It's important. Yeah.
But it doesn't need to be silly. So it was fun. That was a really sweet period of songwriting. And I think it just expanded it. It changed it. It moved it kind of, So
I just love that you felt freedom to, especially as someone who's so deeply connected to worship and writing songs for worship. I love that you felt the freedom to write something that was not just regular Sunday morning congregational something, but you felt, I'm assuming you felt the freedom as an artist or as a creative person to be like, this is what I'm feeling. This is what I have energy for right now.
Yeah, I think I always sang to my kids when they were little, and so it just felt like the next step, the next thing to do. Oh, and we did worship for these for this women's Bible study, which was pretty big back in those days, as in there were a lot of kids. And so we knew we needed a kids program kind of thing going. And so Donna Schroeder and I, her husband's Glenn, and they were pastors at Anaheim. And so she and I she would tell me what she was going to be teaching. And so I would write a song for whatever the moment was.
Amazing.
That was really fun. But again, it was a hearing thing. All of it, now when I look back, I realize that is really underneath or all around every move of that season.
Casey Coram has said something that has really meant a lot to me, and it sort of ties a bow on exactly what you've been touching on here, even this morning, in the early formational parts of the Vineyard, having an expectation that the Holy Spirit was present with us and speaking, that the Spirit had an opinion, and if we could partner with that and hear it, we could go with it, I love this. Casey says that he thinks a lot of this is rooted in some ways in the fact that John Wimber was a jazz musician. And in order to play jazz really well, you got to know the rules. But jazz is a fundamental breaking of the rules. And then a part of the breaking of the rules is in especially like really great expressions of jazz in America is there's improvisation. So there's this space left in the song where it's improvisation. There's a solo, and maybe it's a sax player or a piano player, and that person is literally letting the song come through them letting it happen. Where are we going? We don't know. We're like listening 1 millisecond ahead for the next note or whatever. And Casey has sort of pondered out loud, like, I wonder if there's not some of John's willingness to embrace structure, but at the same time embrace like this improvisational framework for church or listening. And I think it just makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I'd never thought about that, but it's a really good point.
I think so. I think part of what it means to be a Vineyard person, or part of what it means to be a Vineyard worship leader or pastor, or whatever, is to be someone who is comfortable with improvisation, comfortable in moments where we don't have it all plotted out.
Yeah, well, that was definitely true. Yeah, that's a really interesting way. That's good perspective.
Yeah, I thought it was great. And it kind of just puts a bow a little bit on what you've been saying so far as well. Like, we're listening,
Yeah. Now, can I shift a little bit from that?
Yeah, I wish you would.
So I think that if I look now in everyday, ordinary, plain existence, I see the thread of that through just normal exchanges that have nothing to do with worship, but have everything to do with the tie of human to human. With that,
tell me what that means for you, like everyday human to human.
Some of this will sound weird, but maybe I can tie it all up in a nice bow at the end.
Yeah.
But the same thing as listening for the song, there have been moments of thinking about someone, and then as I am thinking, there's a text or there's a phone call. Mm-hmm. And it's not that that's, oh, so cool that happened. It's more of the understanding that there are connections all around. And now I'm paying attention to those. So there was one time over the holidays where I thought of my friend, sent her a text and just said, thinking of you. And it was at a moment when she had just burst into tears over something that had happened this past year for her. Such a sweet gift between me and her, but also where there's a connecting point with me and Jesus in that, because I feel like it was a gift from him to me, because I got to have that with her.
Yeah.
That connection of moment to moment with different people. It happened like you were talking about in the beginning, where we hadn't talked, nothing had happened between you and me, no conversation.
No.
And then I'd see a picture of you and send it to you, right?
Yeah, amazing.
I think that's the humanity of that, the sweetness of connecting us as people with each other. And John, I think that's where I learned that. I think it's covered the whole of life. So it's covering with my grandkids, who both, all 9, live out of town. Yeah. So it's not just a family tie, it's a friend tie. It's having a feeling about somebody and following up on it, making the phone call, sending the text.
It's a way of living.
Yes.
It's a way of like orienting your life. And what I hear in it too as well is like, we are more connected than we know.
Yes.
Right? Like life is more connected than we know. And we don't always have language for it, but we are so tied together at some sort of, really wonderful, amazing spirit level where, we're picking up on the subharmonics that the Holy Spirit is giving.
Yes. But the attentiveness is something that you have, it takes time to.
Well, one of the things I've noticed is it's like, if you're going to live a life of the Spirit, it's learning how to hear the really small and quiet things, because like, it's so easy to just be like, pushed it to the side, gone, pushed away, gone.
Right.
Keeping going with my plan for the day.
Right.
Not calling.
And also the loud, there's so much noise. Mm-hmm. You can be surrounded by so many things because we've got social media, we've got, our phones going off. There's so much noise. So to be able to pull things down, to listen in the midst of that, that takes time, of continuing to think about being attentive.
Yeah.
You know? So
Amen.
for my overall life, that's the biggest gift that John gave.
Oh, amen. Amen. And the other thing I hear in that, in addition to like life is more connected than we know, and we can like live like this, not just think about our Sunday morning sets like this, but we could think about our friendships and our kids and what we're going to do like this as well. I've also noticed, even just in the examples that you've given and my encounters with you and lots of other people as well, but not only is life more connected than we know, but the purpose of that connection is to bring us together. Like it's the purpose is like love. The purpose is encouragement. It's to bring us together. And so when we're listening for the Spirit, when we're trying to pay attention, He's oftentimes giving us little things, and the little things He gives us, they don't push us further away from one another. They actually bring us closer together. You know,
Yeah.
always the work of the Spirit to bring the
Always.
people of God, or not even all the people together. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that John would say the meat is in the street. And I don't think I understood it to the degree that it's moved something in me now that's different. And so things feel disconnected in society and culture. And somehow the eye-to-eye contact, the paying attention to the person right in front of you, we've lost a lot of that. And I'm finding connections with strangers that I didn't have before because of being attentive.
Yeah.
Looking at their
believe that.
face, looking at their eyes, asking a question. I mean, all of those things. And so that's why I say it's kind of hit the whole of life instead of just church life,
Yeah.
And obviously we love it in our church life, but it's sweet to see it hit every single aspect of all of life,
That's beautiful. I love that.
that has, meant a lot to me. I think the thing with with Vineyard worship, for a long time, I was the only girl
Yeah.
in the room. So,
Well, why don't we?
I had a bunch of brothers,
Yeah.
and those relationships are really precious to me, even to this day. And to again have those connecting moments with all of those guys. Yeah, it's just.
That's the gold.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
gold.
Well, since you brought that up, why don't we just explore this for a second? You're a female, you're leading worship in the Vineyard. A lot of dudes are around. And even to this day, I mean, obviously we have way more female participation, way more amazing female worship leaders. So it's definitely increased, but it's still like lots of guys. Could you just talk to me for a minute about what has it felt like being a woman in a world that is very masculine, and especially even in modern worship, even though there's lots more female participation now, it still feels heavily masculine. Yeah. So what does that mean to you? What has your experience been there? And we'll just start there. Yeah.
I think that in the beginning, in the early days of the Vineyard, that it was never an issue of being pushed to the side. John just recognized whatever was coming up and whoever was in front of him. That's just the way he operated. So you would start doing something, and then he'd point to it and say, "Hey, you're doing something."
Yeah.
And that was the way that we operated with that. So he was great with me that way, always encouraging.
Yeah.
Very helpful with all of that. And when I traveled in the 90s around to different churches was when I saw how much pain was out there from women who their pastor would say, "I see something on you."
Yeah.
But then there were the men that they were leading, because it would be an all-male band then, were upset because they were way better musicians.
Yeah.
And could have done the job better as far as the musicianship was concerned.
Yeah.
And so there was a battle for that. And And I suppose if I'm honest
Yeah.
about it, you know what? I guess I just trusted that there was actual gifting.
Mm-hmm.
So this is my part. My part is that I can hear and lead people into
Yeah, this is
God's
the thing you
presence.
came to give.
This is who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And so now I'm going to surround myself with the best musicians that I can
Yes.
to help me go there.
Yeah.
And so that's what I did. I had amazing people with me. But the gift of those people was that they recognized that on me as well. So there,
Yeah.
so there wasn't any question about, oh yeah, she's not very good, but we don't have a choice. We have to play with her, if we're going to be at the church.
Yeah.
Instead, it was these amazing musicians who gathered around me, who we were all a part of a team
Mm-hmm.
that were going somewhere, and they trusted my leadership, and that wasn't very common.
Yeah, that was really beautiful and kind of a forerunner to a lot of the things we're beginning to see more now.
Yeah, and so it just wasn't very common back then that the guys were willing to back a female
The way they did you.
leader.
Yeah. Yeah. So you felt supported.
Oh gosh, yes. There were a couple of pastors who
Sure.
had a hard time with me being there, and a couple of people who came up to me after being at, for example, Anaheim, because I led worship at Anaheim for 12 years or something, from mid-90s until 2007 or something. Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
Anyway, long time. And there were a couple people that would come up after the fact and say, oh yeah, it used to be that when I heard your voice, I would just turn around and walk out of the church until you were done, because no woman should be up front leading.
Whoa.
Those are always interesting conversations.
Yeah.
So
Wow,
it's not
thank
that
you.
they weren't out there.
Yeah, thank you. Really appreciate that. Wow.
Such good encouragement.
So glad I came to church
Glad
today.
you felt like you needed to share that with me.
Yeah. My goodness.
By the way, that person came full circle and decided that it was okay for me to do that. That's why you
Praise
told
the
me
Lord.
that story.
Yeah. Thank you.
So and actually that's a good thing for people to hear, because that kind of conversation happens.
Yeah, it does.
And to think that it doesn't happen is crazy. It happens.
Yeah.
So just because I was female.
Yeah. Well, this is slightly different, obviously, because it doesn't have the male-female dynamic to it. But for about 6 months at one point, and this is many years ago, 6 months, almost every single Sunday morning when I was leading worship, this woman came up to me. This is hysterical. She would come up to me and she would tell me some version of like, "You're a terrible person." Yeah, it would be like, you're really mean, you're a terrible person, and you don't pastor people well. And it'd be like 10 seconds before I'm supposed to get on stage, right? And at first I was like, you're crazy, or whatever. And then after a few weeks, I start believing this. I start believing what am I doing, right? And this went on for months. And I didn't tell anyone because I was so shook by this person's persistence on this. And I wasn't mature enough to know, this is probably them dealing with something. Or if it is me, I wasn't mature enough to know how to even investigate it or handle it, right? So I just stuffed it. Stuff. And after about 6 months, after not telling anyone, and it's beginning to affect me, Heather has a dream. And in the dream, she dreams that I'm in the closet and I'm changing my clothes over and over and over again. And every time I change my clothes, I become more ridiculous. I put on something more and more ridiculous.
Gosh.
And then at the end of the dream, Heather says, I look almost like a clown. And she hears a voice that in the dream she perceived to be God. And the voice said, tell Adam to don't change a thing. I like him exactly the way he is.
Oh,
right?
gosh.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
amazing.
So she gets up the next morning. She has this dream on a Saturday night. She gets up on a Sunday morning. I'm getting ready to leave to go to church. And she's like, I had a dream last night. And I felt like God is saying to you, don't change who you are. He likes you just the way that you are. Does that mean anything to you? I almost fell off. I was like, what? Yeah. But to your point,
That's exactly what it's like.
these conversations happen, don't
Yep,
they?
they do. They happen. And and it can take you out.
It can totally take you out.
It really can.
Yeah.
So fortunately, it didn't.
Yeah.
I had people around me that helped me process or that came right alongside of me and said, that's just ridiculous.
It never got on
So
you.
that was good. I think there was something about fighting to not only figure out who I was, but to stay engaged and to keep showing up and to keep doing this. And then it gets easier to not let those things, they kind of slide off or bounce off.
Yeah, the more
after a
you know
while.
who you really
Right.
are, the more you're unaffected by people who are trying to say who they think you are.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
That's it.
So that helps.
Oh, that's massive.
Staying.
I don't think I got any of that till I was 35, though. I
Takes a
seriously,
long
yeah, like Richard Rohr's second half of life
Yes,
stuff. Like I was like, even like at year 33, someone could like spout an opinion at me and it could take me out,
Right.
But
Yeah.
it took me a while to start getting rooted into who I really was.
I think there was a time when I helped an Anglican Church plant.
Yeah.
And the thing that I heard, that small voice that I heard when he had asked me to help out with establishing the worship for that church, I heard, there's a deposit in you that's for this people.
Mm.
So being able to walk into that environment and just believe that,
Yeah, no matter what the challenges
there's something
are.
in me that's for this people. So I'm just going to give that thing that I know is in who I am, and I'll give that to them. So those simple songs, which is, that's just the way I write. That's the way I hear.
Mm-hmm.
2 chords, maybe, sometimes 3.
Yeah.
And maybe just 2 lines of words, simple phrases. Those would sing to me when I would read them. So I just started putting tiny little choruses, making tiny little choruses of those. And instead of worrying about whether they were short or, too simple or any of that, I thought, no, this is who I am. So I'm going to walk in this. I'm just going to do this. I'll just be this with every ounce of my being.
Amen.
And I think if it were me in front of, a bunch of women who were worship leaders, I would say, figure out what voice do you have? Who are you? And then be that with everything that you are.
That's right.
So what I know about myself is that when I sing, there's something about gentleness and peace.
Yes.
And that's just who I am.
Yes.
And so to not worrying about whether or not I fit in the current sound or the current culture, that's beside the point.
Yeah.
The point is that I just sing like I sing.
Yeah.
Instead of trying to sing like everybody else sings.
Yeah, I think authenticity trumps everything. And I think in order to be authentic, you have to have, it really helps to have some self-awareness about who you really are.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I'm the only one who can bring that because I'm the only Cindy.
That's
right.
right.
So,
No, that's
and
right.
I know we hear that kind of stuff a lot, but it's become very centered for me.
Yeah.
Finally, at 58. So I'm grateful for that because there's no apology now when I come to sing or when somebody asks me to do it, I don't think, oh, shoot, I can only bring gentleness and peace. Instead I think, oh, okay, so that must be what you want because you're asking me to come.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to bring who I am
And
wherever
I also like
I am.
to just insert another little note here as well. You just said, I bring gentleness and peace. I would like to just say, those are actual fruits of the Spirit.
Right.
Whereas, power is not a fruit of the Spirit. It's not, it's like, is that a part of the work of the Spirit? Yeah, maybe. But like demonstration or, loudness or authority. Yeah, these are things that kind of are a part of the work of the Spirit. But I would just like to say, like, gentleness and peace. It's like, it's kind of a thing.
That's so funny.
It's kind of something I want to grow in my life, right?
Oh, I never thought about that. I think too that the thought that I could sing and there's something that washes over somebody or helps with healing or in any way like that, I'm good with that.
Oh,
I'm actually good with it. It's okay.
I am just medieval enough to believe all of that.
That's a great phrase.
Yeah, I believe that. I think you could come and sing at my church and people could get healed. I believe that. In fact, more people at my church have been saved or come to some sort of an awareness of God and wanted to follow Jesus in worship way more than my sermons. We're always touching something else.
Yeah, I guess that even being able to say that took time to come to that point because there was a season where there were really loud, strong, boisterous, not in a bad way, but just big voices. Yes. And I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
I couldn't sing that way.
Yeah.
And so I started to kind of fade in who I was and pull back.
Yeah.
Because I kept thinking, oh, so I must be irrelevant now. This must not. And that took a fight. It took a long time before I, and I mean a fight within myself. Like I had to wrestle and wrestle that through until I came to the other side where I thought, oh, wait, the same words, people say the same words to me over and over when I sing. And I've been pushing those to the side thinking that isn't enough or not current or, fill in the blank of the word to use.
Wow.
And so
I just want to say, like, this is this might be even the most important thing we've touched on so far. Gosh, for whoever's listening, female, male, young, old, whatever it is, like, Cindy, this is the thing. Like, to trust that the gift that God has given us is enough and that it really does matter. And it doesn't matter what the trend is, or it doesn't even matter what we're surrounded with at the moment, you know? Like, to bring what it is we have, that is what is essential.
There was this story just came to mind, so I'm just going to go ahead and say it.
Yeah, go ahead, tell it.
There was a period of time when Mike Turgiano, he was really, really sick. And I saw a picture of myself singing a song, one of my songs, over him. And so we were going to New York to visit them. So I gathered my courage.
Yeah.
Because I know he loves me too. That's a little bit easier.
Yep.
But I gathered my courage and went over to him while we were at his house. And I said, I think there's something about me singing my song over you. Would it be okay if I just take your guitar and sing? And I think the impact that had was probably the beginning of realizing, oh, this is who I am. I need to just go with who I am. And it's so sweet, the peace in myself, you know, to not feel the harried questions before I'm going to get up and sing, and to bring myself wherever I am, and with no apology.
Yeah.
Gosh, it's just such a nice life.
Yeah, it is.
to be able to live that way.
And I love that last little phrase, with no apology. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was apologizing a lot for a long time. And very unsure of myself and trying to find somebody else's voice. If I could just sound like fill in the blank, then maybe I would be relevant, you know? And then maybe sometimes, you know, you mentioned the roar thing. the gift for me in reading about the second half of life is that not having the pressure to keep building, but rather being.
Yeah.
And so here I am. This is Cindy Rethmeier that was formed through all those years.
Yeah.
And now I can just rest in who I am and bring that everywhere that I go.
Yeah.
And I will say, sometimes I feel like we're missing that female, sweet, soft, gentle voice.
Yes.
Because there's this pressure to be big and loud and gravelly, and I think that's really cool to be.
Of course.
I mean, I want to make sure that that's out there. I think that there is an amazing thing on those voices.
It's a part of the approved palette.
Yes, it is.
But it isn't the only palette.
It's not the only palette, and that's the thing that I think it's sad if we give that up, because we give up the softness and the sweetness and the stillness and the gentleness and all of that. If we give all of that up, so it's more of the finding what is your voice, who are you, what is it that you have, and then being that, you know. And sometimes that can take time, you know, to figure that out.
I think it takes forever.
Oh gosh. It might be a lifelong journey.
Yeah, I think it is a lifelong journey, but I do think that, you know, that those first years, especially for people who are younger who are listening to this, some self-discovery and having some people who can help you know yourself is really important in this area.
Yeah, I think too, those shifts in seasons of life, it can be really sad if you're hanging on to a season that has been, but it's time to move on to a new season. So I think one of the gifts in this has been the complete joy I feel singing to my grandkids. It's very like the joy that I felt in front of the few thousand leading worship. There's not really a difference in the sweetness of those. So one was for a few thousand, and the other is for the grandchild of the moment.
Yeah.
And
same feeling, same experience,
and same gift.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, there's really something being translated between the two of us. It means everything to me, you know. So I'm not currently leading worship on a regular basis anywhere.
Yeah.
But there's nothing in me that's thinking, oh no, I'm not relevant. I'm not fill in the blank again.
Yeah.
I'm not. Instead, I think, look at this amazing time that I get to be alive and doing this.
Yeah. New season.
Yeah.
New day.
And sweet new season. And I love the conversations that I get to have with women, you know, who are leading worship, and, you know, people like Sarah Elmer, and only one time with Hannah, but just women who are out there that we get to talk because we're women in an environment that's mostly men, and be encouraging to each other, and and have those conversations about the whole of ordinary life, not just the leading in front of whatever amount of people there are.
Yeah, isn't that like the spiritual path? Somehow making those two things match more and more.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. Really becoming something that's the same on the stage and off the stage, you know?
Oh, yeah.
Being true in both places.
And that coming alongside each other is so important, especially for women, because it can end up being competitive, or, well, you know what? That can be that way with anybody. It doesn't matter male or female.
Yeah,
it's just competitive. But I think the coming alongside and encouraging and being willing to say, that was so beautiful. I love seeing you in that, you being present with all that you are and bringing that, because we're experiencing God in your presence,
That's right.
In them being who they are. It's just such a gift. I feel like I think there's a deposit in all of us if we're created in his image.
And we are.
And there's something that we bring, something of the image of God that we bring, we alone carry. And there's just nothing more beautiful than being with someone who knows that and is that. I mean, wow.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Wow.
Amazing. That's really beautiful. Really beautiful. Hey, here's what I want to do. We have talked about a bunch of stuff.
Yes.
Yeah. We're obviously going to have to do a part 2 at some point.
Oh. Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
So just promise me. Here's what I want to do, though. I would love to end this podcast in the way that we end all of our podcasts. And I would love for you to maybe share a moment when you've experienced like great joy.
Man, I even knew that you had this question, and I should have thought more about it. First thought, though, of what comes to mind, I actually already said, is when my grandkids start singing, I write name songs for all of them,
Okay, what does that mean?
So they all have a song that's just about their name.
Oh, man, that's amazing. So you've written 9 of these songs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So each one of them has a song, and just so much, gosh, it just makes my heart explode when they come to the age where they're singing each other's songs. And when everything in them bursts when they hear their own name. Or, so I did a recording for all of them back a couple years ago for Christmas, and then they all got their own little headphones and MP3 player.
Yeah.
And they would listen to the songs, so it's their name songs, their siblings, their cousins, and then these really fun, lighthearted songs. And it was fully produced, the whole thing like a real record.
Yeah.
And to see the delight and the joy in them from hearing those songs that were written for them like that, there's just not much that. And I had my own kids' songs on it too.
That's great.
So I think those kids, those gifts in my life, I would say those are moments of utter and complete joy that really do make me burst inside. The thought of passing that on to them, and hopefully they do that.
Well,
it's
going to last.
It's like, so sweet.
Yeah, that's going to last. That's a great story. We're going to end there. That's a great story. It doesn't get more beautiful than that. All right. Thanks, Cindy.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Peace, everybody.
Hey everybody, this is Casey Corum, the producer of the Ferment podcast. Thanks for listening. If you've been enjoying the podcast, I've got a couple ways you could really help us. First of all, review the podcast on iTunes or the podcast platform of your choice. This helps more people find us. Also, connect with us on social media, on Instagram at the Ferment Podcast and on Twitter at FermentCast. All right, people, see you next time.